Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome back to another beginner webinar. Today, we're going to be touching on the psychology side of trading. There's going to be the technical, the performance, and the psychology or self side of trading. And really, for me, this is where most traders, in my personal opinion, this is where they fall off, is because it's very difficult to dive into the psychology and what are the emotions that are holding you back in trading. But really, I feel like it all ties together into everything in every aspect of life. And you start going through this, and the more that you start to understand this, the more you start understanding who you are as a person. And really, no matter what trading throws my way, I'm always going to be extremely grateful that I dived into trading stocks, because it forced me to understand who I am as a person, because you're never going to get successful at trading if you don't know who you are. What makes you tick, what triggers you, what emotions do you deal with, and each person has varying degrees of, the emotions that they have to deal with. We all kind of go through the same thing. There's a lot of similarities between everybody's journey, but each of us has our own unique thing, and that's part of the reason why coaching and trading is so difficult. But trading psychology is the study of how emotions and mindset affects investment decisions. Understanding and managing these factors can lead to better trading outcomes, especially for short sellers who face unique psychology challenges. Introduction to trading psychology. Trading psychology explores the cognitive and emotional factors that influence trading decisions. It helps traders understand how these emotions and mindset impact their risk tolerance, market analysis, and overall trading performance. Number one is going to be the emotional impact. Fear, greed, and FOMO are common emotions experienced by traders. Especially like absolute beginner traders that don't really have any idea of what's going on. They think that they're just going to miss out on every move, and so they get such bad FOMO that they'll just dive into a trade way before it's actually giving you the signals to get into that trade. Then the fear, that's another thing that beginner traders are going to start dealing with relatively soon, is seeing that, oh my gosh, man, I'm down money on the day. And a lot of beginner traders don't have a lot of money, so that definitely plays a huge influence, and they can get stubborn. It can lead to, really poor risk management and eventually blowing your account. And then, after you start figuring out how to calm your nerves down with the FOMO and the fear, then that's when greed kicks in. Because then you start making money, and it's like, oh, man, I could make more money than I've ever made in my life. And then that starts playing in with you, and then you start deviating from the trading plan, which allows for your emotions to really take hold of you, and you make very reckless decisions. But understanding their influence on the decision making is crucial for navigating the market effectively. One of the things that whenever I talk about psychology, one thing that really always clicks in my head is Mike Tyson saying that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And I feel like the reason that I was able to find success relatively early in my trading career was because of my kickboxing. I was a very high level kickboxer, and a lot of the emotions, obviously, it's slightly different. Like, I dealt with, greed, or like being overconfident, or all that kind of stuff, and it played differently in each sport. But I really do look at trading stocks like a sport. It's a performance activity that you have to gain the experience and learn how to deal with your emotions that are holding you back, and putting that all together with the trading plan. For me, that made it so that I created more of a systematic approach so I could cut out most of these emotions. But the mental model, developing a strong mental model for trading involves understanding market dynamics. What is the game of trading? How does the big money make money? And once you start understanding how they mess with people's heads and their emotions, then it allows it to be a lot easier for you to start recognizing, oh, hey, yeah, it's doing a bunch of crazy stuff here, but The price action is in no man's land. That's not where the big money is going to be at. The big money is going to be in either at the towards the ceiling or towards the floor. And when you can start to recognize that and understanding, okay, yeah, maybe you can make a decent trade in the middle somewhere, but it's not really good for the risk management. And then analyzing historical data. What has it done in the past? Is this thing usually it pops up and it finds a top in the pre-market and then it fades all day long, or what? And you start to piece all this stuff together, and it goes into everything, which is why I created the pillar one in my free community, because that's the first thing you need to be able to recognize. What are the patterns that you're looking for? What's the easiest setup? Gap and crap. What are the red flag criteria? How do you analyze volume and chart patterns? How do you know what areas to trade in? All this kind of stuff goes together with reading the volume, the times of sales, all that kind of stuff. But then it goes into the performance activity, which is going to be the next part. Okay, cool. You have a plan. How well did you follow the plan? Did you manage your risk really well? Did you trade in the allotted time that you gave yourself? What was your sizing like? All that kind of stuff. Like, how well did you follow the plan? That's, for me personally, that's the performance side of things. And then the mental side is, how did you do on the other two? And then, did your mind play any tricks on you? And that comes from the journal and in tracking. How are you? Are you stressed out about things? How's your sleep? Are you fighting with your significant other? Are you, sick? Like, there's a million different things that can play into that, and it all ties together. And then forming an objective perspective to guide investment decisions. And like I said, it kind of all circles together. And then behavioral bias. Being a short seller in small caps, you'll have these gurus that tell you that, at the very beginning, most people find their way to a breakout room where people start buying the breakouts. And that's not a good idea, because, where the big money is buying, they're buying towards the floor. The breakout is either going to be at the mid-level or at the ceiling. That's where the big money is selling their position, or, bigger, more experienced short sellers like myself and a bunch of other ones are getting short. That's not where you want to be buying a stock at. And then you start getting into short selling once you start figuring out, and if you didn't get knocked off after blowing your first long account like I did, then you start learning, oh, dude, 90% of these fell. And then you get a bias, like, oh, no. All these small caps, they fell. Yeah, the majority of them do fail. But the key to that is identifying the timing on it, because your losses are uncapped when you're a short seller. You can literally lose all of your money in one trading account if you don't have a max loss, if you don't have a max loss on a ticker or whatever you have set up with your broker. Really, that you could have unlimited losses and blow your account and even owe your broker money, which sucks, trust me. But cognitive bias are systematic errors in thinking that that can distort our perception of information and lead to irrational decisions. Identifying and mitigating these biases is important for successful trading. One of my examples in the previous one was GameStop. This doesn't just happen to retail traders. This also happens to people that are part of hedge funds or have tons of experience and are institutional ownership or whatever, and they'll get squeezed. They'll get short squeezed. And having a bias is not a good thing. You need to come into the market every day and be very, very present. And that way it allows you to, okay, yeah, this stock, say it's had 9 gaps. Every time it closes red. Okay, cool. Does that mean that it's going to be guaranteed to close red this time or close below the open level, which is close red? No. Every day, every trade, every ticker is completely different. And so you have to be present and in the moment so that you can reduce your risks. Emotions and mindset in trading. I'm going to touch on these a lot because these are the things that I really do feel like every trader deals with. When you start dealing with other ones, it can be more selective to, your personality and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like fear, greed, and FOMO, every trader can relate to. So these are going to be the things that we touch on in this webinar. Emotion play a powerful role in trading. Fear, greed, excitement, and disappointment can lead to impulsive decisions and negatively impact returns. Developing emotional control is essential for making rational choices. Fear of loss can cause traders to hold onto losing positions for too long or exit profitable trades prematurely, which I kind of tie that in with FOMO and fear can lock into it. What I look at fear is when you should cut your position, but the loss gets away from you because you're generally sized in too big, or you have too much of a bias that it's going to go down or up. You don't want to respect your risk, and then you start seeing your losses are higher than you're willing to accept, and it makes you freeze. It's like a deer in the headlights, and it is something that you don't ever want to be a part of, because that is a horrible, horrible, gut-wrenching thing. You're sitting there, you're praying, I swear to God, if this happens again, I'm never. It's almost like the first time you ever get super, super drunk, and you're like, if I don't die, I'm never drinking again. And then, unfortunately, most of us, we do go back to drinking, but hopefully, you only need to feel the emotion of fear a couple times in trading to be like, all right, I'm not going to do that anymore. Greed can lead to overtrading and taking on excessive risk, potentially jeopardizing capital. This is something that I definitely 100% dealt with a lot a couple years ago when I first started to find, well, actually about 3 years ago when I started finding my success in trading. Once I hit that milestone for me, and I got over this threshold of money, I was like, oh my gosh, it did something. It triggered a greed emotion, which made me overtrade, and because if I was close to that, but I didn't break over that threshold, then it wasn't good enough. And I always needed that. I tied my happiness to my P&L, and it really made me greedy, and it caused me overtrading, like this thing says, excessive risk, which it did. And then I almost blew my account, and I got really lucky, which led on to more emotions. But the other one that is a huge thing that everyone deals with is FOMO. FOMO can lead to impulsive actions, often driven by emotions that can lead to poor decision making and missed opportunities. Nothing is worse than, say you have a level, right? I'm going to draw on here. Say that this is the level you want to trade in. The stock is trading around here, and you get in right there, and then it starts going up, and you're like, oh, I can't cut this off, and then you cut it off, it pops, and then fails all the way down, and you're sitting there going, dude, if I would have just waited, I would have had the most amazing trade ever. I would have, that happens all the time. Or, say, the way I trade is you have target 1, target 2, target 3, and target 4. Well, a lot of times beginner traders they'll see their profits and they lock in all their profits here, and then the stock just tanks and then tanks. And if they would have held and covered half, and half, like I teach, they would have made like 3 or 4 times as much money. But because people need instant gratification, they jump out of the trade too early because they see the P&L and it messes with them. That's why I tell all the beginner traders in my community, hey, you need to trade the process, not the P&L. And obviously that's a lot easier said than done. But cognitive bias in trading. Cognitive bias are systematic errors in thinking that can distort our perception of information and lead to irrational decisions. Understanding that these biases is crucial for making informed trading decisions. I actually just had this conversation with one of my students yesterday. He was trading Spirit, Save is the ticker, and it's got a bunch of bad news. He's like, oh, dude, this thing's gonna die. It's gonna die. And I was just like, if you go back to the daily and you look at the daily chart, it already has died. It's trading at like almost all-time lows. And I was like, okay, it already did die. what are you thinking that you're going to short it to? And then he starts saying that um, the company's going to go bankrupt. I'm like, okay, so your idea is that you think that it's going to go from, I think it's trading like $3.15, and I'm like, so you think it's going to go to zero, and so you think that you're going to make that $3 difference, but he's got a bias. But what if the company doesn't go bankrupt? What if they get a hold of some money, and it's a big company's like, hey, yeah, you guys are running Spirit horribly, but I think that I can turn this around. I'm going to invest some capital and I'm going to turn your business around. That could happen. And if it did, you shorten just because you have a bias, that's a horrible decision. Or like on the flip side of things, go back to the example of GameStop. Those hedge funds are like, oh no, this is going to go basically the same thing that my student had. Oh, it's going to go down to zero. They're bankrupt. They're screwed. It's going to go all the way down. We're going to squeeze out every last penny. Instead of just being happy with the gains they locked in, they want to hold it, and then you have a bunch of guys on Reddit that are pumping this thing up, and then they're starting to squeeze out all these guys that have a bias that's going to go down to the floor. It's never a good idea. Just because a stock is shown that it's a piece of crap, on that day in particular, it might, all it takes is one trader. All it takes, especially in small caps. For my students, I use this example all the time. If you have a stock that, say, it's got a 5 million float and it's trading at $2. So you're telling me that with $10 million, I can essentially buy every single share of that stock. Okay, well, $10 million is not a lot of money for in the grand scheme of things. And so really, it doesn't take a lot of money. It takes one rich person around the world or one rich snobby kid to ruin your day. And you need to be in there and gain the experience of like, okay, this is not reacting right. This, from the data, this thing should have tanked. It should have went down. It should not be holding this EMA or by this time, or the price action should not be doing this move. It's moving really, really erratically. You start getting that information, and that's going to save you. But the only way you get that is if you don't have a bias that, I've had a 90-day win streak, and I haven't lost a trade in 90 days, so I'm always right. Which I've had that happen before, and it's a very shitty experience. Overconfidence, which is very funny. That's the next thing. Overconfidence, overestimating the likelihood of events based on how readily they come to mind, and that's something I definitely had to deal with a lot because, like I said, at the very beginning, I had very, very quick success. I made a lot of money really quick, and then I lost it all because I didn't have the experience. I had a bias. I thought that I found the Holy Grail, and then, I had a low point, and then I started to find a lot more success, and I really did. I thought that I unlocked like a whole new level. I was like, all right, cool, man, I'm good. And then, I hit 2022, and we talked to a lot of other traders. That was a really rough year, and I got my ass kicked. And I was overconfident because I just had the most amazing year of my life, and then everything just went to shit. And it was a very, very rough time for me, and I went through a lot of emotional things. My dog died. I had a lot of stuff that I should not have been trading. In hindsight, I should not have been trading because my psychology, my mental state of mind was not in the right place to trade. Then anchoring bias, relying too heavily on the first piece of information received. Like my student from yesterday. Oh, well, I've been seeing in the news this thing's going to go bankrupt. They're done. They're supposed to get bought out by JetBlue, and the deal fell through. They're done. Okay. Yeah, maybe they are, but are you in the meetings? Are you talking to the CEO? Are you like do you know if they have somebody coming in that's going to invest money? You don't know anything. Our job is to, okay, you have enough information. You have okay, this stock is worthy of taking a trade. It's a crap company. Okay, cool. Well, what's the setup? How do you trade that setup? And what makes you identify an entry? And then what would your risk be, which is the most important thing? And then what are your targets? And then how do you keep yourself emotionally calm so you can follow that plan? And then loss aversion, the tendency to feel the pain of a loss more strongly than the pleasure of equal gains. That's another thing that I've talked to my students about all the time. I have this one guy that kills it. He does phenomenal. And then he'll have, one day that wipes out his whole week. And, the reason for that is because I feel like it's so much easier to focus on the negative than the positive. And it's really easy for you to forget about how good you've been doing, and really you just need to find like a happy balance and start to recognize the emotions that are holding you back in trading. Developing emotional discipline. Emotional discipline is the ability to control emotions and make rational decisions in the face of market fluctuations. It requires self-awareness, mindfulness, and a commitment to disciplined trading practices. Self-awareness. Identify and understand your emotional triggers in trading is crucial for developing emotional discipline that requires introspection and honest self-reflection. And this is why at the very beginning of my, not the very beginning of my trading career, but like about in the middle, like right before I started finding success, I got a really good advice to record myself while I'm trading. And one thing I started noticing was I had like little tics, and I didn't understand this until I read I think he's like Jared Tendler. He has a book where he talks about if you recognize that you're starting to go on tilt, which means that you're about to go off the deep end and just be emotional and do a bunch of dumb stuff. Most people don't realize that's like step 5 or 6 of them going. Like you can start noticing different things. Like, are you hunched over when you're trading? Like, do you start like, are you rubbing your face? Like, do you have anxiety? Do you like, are your brows bunched down because you're getting upset? You're getting angry? Like, you making a noise? Like, what are you doing? And one thing when I started recording myself, I'd go back and a cheat code, by the way, is play it on 2 times speed. That way, if you have an hour-long trading video, it takes you 30 minutes to get through there. But you start watching that, you start watching your body language. It's really crazy because there's so many things that you do subconsciously that you do over and over. Humans are we're like the stocks. We have patterns, and once you can identify your own pattern, it's going to save you an ungodly amount of time. Like, I still catch myself all the time where I'm like, man, I got like my knee. I'll bounce my knee when I'm like super anxious, and I'm like, I'm pumped up, or like, if I have this, I also have mental things where I don't do it, but like I'll have the thought where if I get greedy, where I'm like, I start calculating, oh man, dude, if this hits my final target, I want to make X, Y, and Z money. And I'm like, I recognize that, oh dude, my greed's already kicking in. Okay, well, that only happens on stocks that are way up really, really high. At the same time, when I started going back and tracking not only that emotion, but the stats on the stocks that are like that, most of them don't die. And those are usually the ones that are going to like multi-day bull runners. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of attention on it. You have people that are super greedy on the long side and super greedy on the short side. It makes it very easy for market makers or people with money to manipulate that stock. And that is one thing I've recognized about myself. It's not necessarily a physical thing that I can see on camera, but when I recognize that thought, I have awareness enough to be like, oh, dude, like that I need to watch, and then I'll look at it and be like, hey, should I be in this much size on this stock? I'm usually being over greedy, and those would be other ones where I might size in a little bit too big, and then I start to regulate myself a little bit. Mindfulness, being present in the moment and observing emotions without judgment, allows you to respond to market events in a calm and controlled manner. exactly the same scenario that I talked to my student yesterday. And I was like, hey man, not even just him. This actually, I'm going to go off on a different thing. Is mindfulness with, a lot of people will get into trading where they're trying to escape their 9 to 5 job, or they're in a lot of debt, or they're not happy in life, and so they're trying to come to the stock market for that. And that is one thing that I've noticed a lot, where if you're not mindful and you're not present, like, hey, like, you're trying to force something, you're trying to make money so you can be happier, or like to prove your self-worth, or whatever it might be. That's something that, or on the opposite side of things, like, hey dude, like, you've been killing it, like, and you're starting to add too much size. You're starting to break the rules. You're only supposed to be using 500 shares, and you're using 2,000 shares. You need to reel that back in, or hey, I've noticed that you let a stock go against you a little bit too far a couple times. Each time it's getting a little bit worse and worse and worse. You reel that back in, man, and be more present and understanding that. And then emotional regulation, developing strategies for managing and regulating emotions, such as deep breathing, exercise, or meditation, can help maintain composure during trading sessions. I meditate every single morning, and if I have 2 losses in a row, I have to take a step back. I close my eyes, I check in with myself, and if I feel my brain like it feels like it's about to explode, and I'm super stressed out, I sit there with my eyes closed. I don't care how amazing of a trade this could potentially be. I have to calm down until I can feel my brain start to relax. And for me, when I feel like that, I know that when I recognize that feeling, that I'm starting to get triggered, and it's starting to piss me off, and I need to breathe and calm down. And I look at it and be like, okay, should I size down? Am I not reading the market correctly? Is there something else that's bothering me? Did I not sleep good? Am I stressed about something? Am I mad at somebody or a situation or whatever? There's a million different ways you can go down this rabbit hole, but being able to understand yourself and your emotions is super, super key to being a successful trader. And then cultivating a winning mindset. A winning mindset is characterized by confidence, discipline, and willingness to learn. Cultivating these qualities can improve your trading performance and enhance your overall experience. I'm actually going to go back. See if I can go back. Yeah. So it also said down here, exercises. That is one thing that I used to be super in shape. I used to be kickboxing when I first started trading stocks, and then I found a lot of success, and I stopped working out. I got fat. I started drinking too much. Started eating shitty, and then it's really funny how all that stuff kind of connects together and just kind of takes you down. Now I'm eating healthy. I work out all the time. I'm not doing what I used to do when I was kickboxing, but I feel good about myself. I feel healthy. I don't drink during the week. I don't stay up late during the week. And if I do stay up late, or if I do not have a good night's sleep, or I'm stressed about something, then I'll either cut my size in half, or I won't trade until I feel good. And the reason for that is because the data has showed me, because I got so good at tracking my emotions and my trades, that I can be like, hey man, whenever you're fighting with your wife, or you and your family are fighting, or you're fighting with your friends, or you're starting to stress about money. Like, I don't stress about money now, but right when I went from being super successful to like hitting like rock bottom, there was a lot of stress on finances. I over leveraged myself, and I got into a bad spot, and I was trying to use money from trading to get me out of that hole. And then once I recognized that, I stopped. I was like, okay, how can I organize my life in a way that I can relieve a lot more stress on myself, so I can trade properly? Because I know nothing is worse than, I actually had a conversation with a student a couple of days ago, And he's like, yeah, but when you're making X amount of money and you're confident that you can make that, it's of course it's easy for you. I'm like, yeah, there's a flip side to that though too, because nothing's worse than knowing that you can make X amount of money because you've done it multiple times or very consistently over a long period of time, and then not being able to make one and one equal two. Like that's a super horrible feeling. And especially when I got, in my personal situation, I got over leveraged, and I know that logically I could have got myself out of that situation with trading, but my emotions weren't aligned with what my plan was, and so I had to come up with a different idea because I took a step back. I was like, well, clearly this is not working, and that's one thing I learned from kickboxing was I used to be so stubborn that if something wasn't working, I would just try harder and harder and harder, and then it'd work worse and worse and worse. And that's one thing I'm very grateful that I had 70 kickboxing fights. I learned a shit ton about myself, but then I was able to translate that into trading, and I was able to take a step back. I'm like, hey man, this is not working. How do we find out a different way where I can still trade, but then I can get myself in a better place? And once I did that, it's crazy because I had to stop trading for like 5 or 6 months, which really sucked. I still watched, and I still checked in and everything, but really I had to drop trading from my top priority down to like almost like dead last. But because I did that, it allowed me to get everything else in line, and then once I was able to come back to trading, boom, it's like not only did like the old Adam come back, but like a new and improved. I went to a whole different level, and I really got myself to where I don't have to stress about things. But you have to have that winning mindset and being able to, have the trading experience to understand when things are not working. Then why are they not working? What is wrong? And always ask yourself questions. And another huge thing is set clear goals. That's how I actually got over leveraged. Was bought a brand new house. I moved to a whole new area, and I had unrealistic trading goals. Yeah, I was making a lot of money, but the problem was I didn't have a reserve. And so when the market shifted a little bit, and I started losing money, I'm like, whoa, dude, I got to pay the mortgage. I gotta pay my car insurance, my bills. How am I going to make this work? I didn't have clear goals. I didn't have realistic goals. When I started trading again, after I, dropped trading from the top priority to the lower priority, I came out with a whole different thing. I was like, hey, before I start scaling this back up, I don't need to be making that much money like it was before. What I need to do is I need to have clear goals. What's the first goal? Well, the first goal is pay off all my credit cards. I don't have any credit card debt right now. I paid off all my loans. Paid off, when I moved, which is how I got out of my situation. I moved, I sold my house, and I made enough money from that to pay off pretty much everything. But then moving and all that kind of stuff, I added in more debt, and I got I got a new car for my wife. I got into a car wreck, and I had to go get a new car, and so I have 2 car payments, some credit card debt, some loans, and so I was like, well, that's the first thing I'm going to knock out. I'm going to knock out my credit card debt. I'm going to knock out the loans, and then I'm going to knock out the car loans. And now the only thing I owe is on this house. And so for me, I'm like, well, realistically, yeah, I could go back to the same size I was trading before, and I if I could replicate that again, I could have this house paid off in no time. Or what would be even better is like what I'm doing now is a hybrid where it's like, okay, I want to start scaling back up, but siphoning out some money and putting money down on the principal of the house. But I promised my son when we moved back here that we would not move again until he graduated high school. So I have 3 years before we can move anyways. So I was like, well, what if I cut this up into 3-part sections? And for me, that works for me. I have a clear-cut goal on like, hey, year 1 I need this, year 2 I need this, year 3 I need this, and it relieved a lot of stress and pressure. But the The reason I'm going into that and telling you guys that is because you need to do the same thing for you. What is your goal? What do you want from this? Is this a side hustle and you just want to pay off credit cards and go on a yearly trip? Do you want this to be a full-time job? And how you understand that is by asking yourself questions. And then embrace continuous learning. One thing that I did, I invested a lot of money into a mind coach. His name's Steve Goldstein. He is the co-host of Alpha Mind Podcast, and he is one of the most phenomenal guys I've ever met in my life. That guy, he cost a lot of money. I got into a mentoring program. And just because I run my own trading community, I still talk to other traders. I'm still learning every day. Just because I know how to trade doesn't mean I can't improve every day. Or, that's the thing I love about trading is you never, if you're doing it correctly, you never get to like that level where you're like, all right, well, I'm just gonna coast. Like, who wants that anyways? I'm always gonna want to push myself, and maybe not just P&L wise, but like, how can I be a better person? How can I be a better coach? How can I, am I focusing too much on trading on my family or vice versa? And it's a game. It's something that I truly enjoy, and like, if you can get yourself to that and invest into learning, go get a bunch of different mentors. Don't just study under one guy. Go study under a few different guys. You might learn a different style. I started learning futures, and I've never traded futures before, and it's fun, really. And swing trading, and my wife is starting to learn options, and there's so many different ways you can make money, but continuous learning and having a growth mindset is such a powerful thing. And then manage risk effectively, especially at the very beginning. If you don't have a lot of capital, the last thing you want to do is get knocked out of the game completely, because then it's so hard to get back into the game. If you're in the game, you need to make sure that you do things correctly. Like when I tell my students, okay, cool, you have a $30,000 trading account. Awesome. Don't worry about wiring out anything, because what you want to do is you want to get that $30,000 account to $50,000. Then you want to get another backup account in a high yield savings account, and that is in case you go off the deep end one day, and that way you're not knocked out of the game. You have a backup. Cool. Now the next step is this and this and this and this. You have a very, very good, effective managing risk plan and how to protect your capital, preserve your capital, and allow it so that you never get knocked out of this game. Then practice patience and discipline. How I do that is through meditation. I meditate every single day, and I just use a generic thing. I use Headspace, and it's something that works really well for me. And I can, if I feel like my patience has been really, really bad, there's a whole course on patience. I can go through there. Or I had a buddy of mine that, if you're part of my trading community, there is a meditation course that I have that a buddy of mine, he made meditating courses for trading stocks, and it goes over some of the stuff like fear and FOMO and patience and overconfidence, all that kind of stuff, and they're really, really good, which you can get for free, obviously. And then strategies for overcoming psychology barriers. Overcoming psychological barriers in trading requires a proactive approach. By implementing strategies to address fear, greed, and cognitive bias, you can improve your decision making and enhance your trading outcomes. Identify your triggers, like what I said with the Jared Tindler, I believe his name is. If you are really good at recognizing something, I guarantee if you really, really break that down, there's like 4 or 5 steps that you've never even recognized before that you might even be able to recognize before you even get to the trading desk. But being able to identify it is, a huge obstacle. Then develop a trading plan. In my free community, I only teach gap and crap because that's all you guys need, honestly. And then identify the plan. What's the entry look like? What's your risk? What are your targets? And then how do you manage that and your emotions so that you don't start, I know Adam said this, but I really think the stock's going to go down. It's breaking over pre-market high. No, don't. Have the discipline to follow the trading plan and just trade that. And then seek professional guidance. Yeah, you can have a free trading community with me. I know of 2 or 3 different guys that I would actually recommend, really, truly. So if you are interested in those, message me or comment on wherever you're watching this. But there is really good guys out there. You have to be careful because there's a lot of BS gurus out there that are just gonna take your money. But there are really good professionals, and another thing is mind coach, or whatever speaks to you. One thing that I tell my students all the time is to sit back, don't ask anybody questions, and just listen to your gut. What do you think you need? Do you need a mentor? Do you need a coach? Do you need to work on your mindset? What is it? And then start finding the things that are going to give you that. And then practice mindfulness. Like I said, what I do is I meditate. I know some people that do deep breath work. And then, another thing I do is I like to go out in the wilderness. I like to break away from the computers and phones and all that kind of stuff. And it grounds me. And that's how I like to do that. But you need to figure out what works for you. And then conclusion and key takeaways that I would like you guys to really. I remember Alex Hormozy. He's a guy that I follow a lot, and for you guys that maybe you've been trading for a long time, and you dive into a bunch of different stuff. If you don't take something away from this, then the last it's 41 minutes that I've been recording this for, you just wasted 41 minutes of your life. The only way that you did not waste time is if you implement some of the stuff. Instead of just going out and consuming all of this information, you need to act on it. You need to use it. It doesn't matter if you're watching other videos or you're reading books or you're doing whatever. That's great. Knowledge is power, but only if you use it. If you don't use it, you didn't gain anything. You just wasted time. It's like I can't remember how Alex Hormozy says it, but it's almost like the smart person's way of wasting time. You look down on people that just sit around and watch Netflix for 7 hours a day, or they play video games for 7 hours a day, or eat junk food and all this kind of stuff. But really, if you're not implementing this stuff, you just wasted 40 something minutes of your time also. So implement something from here. Even if you only take one thing away, that's fine. A lot of the times when I read a book, there might be 2, maybe 3 things that I'm like, oh, that's something new. I like that. That speaks to me. I'm going to implement that. But mastering trading psychology is an ongoing process that requires self-awareness, discipline, and a commitment to continuous learning. By understanding and managing the emotional and cognitive factors that influence decision-making, you can develop a more successful and fulfilling trading experience. Like I said, number 1, self-awareness. Number 2, develop an emotional control. That's how I created my system, my trading system. The reason I created that is because I started going back and looking at, okay, well, what are the issues that I have in trading, and how can I come up with a system that, I had like 3 or 4 different guys that are like mentors to me, and I took bits and pieces from each one of them. I kind of put them together, and I plugged that in with my emotions. I was like, okay, well, I played scenarios out. Okay, well, if this happens, then, or if I take a trade here, there's 2 things that's going to happen. Either this happens or this happens. And then I start playing it through. Okay, well, what happens if this happens? If it goes against me? Then I do this. Then I look for this. And you start playing scenarios through. That way, when you're caught in that scenario, it's not new to you. You've already visualized it. I already know what's going to happen. Okay, this didn't work out. It went over my level of risk. I'm out. I'm done. Why am I done? Because it's not that I lost. It's that I'm giving myself a potential chance to get in at an even higher price and make even more money. And you have to figure out a way to, or at least for me personally, I had to find a way to almost not trick myself, but like I had to figure out a way that made sense to me where I could sit back and I could logically be like, yeah, that works for me. But what works for you, and how do you develop that emotional control? And then cultivate a winning mindset. Foster confidence, discipline, and willingness to learn. Embrace challenges and view setbacks as opportunity for growth. That is one thing I am like I believe in 110%, because really I talk about how I had success, I blew an account, I had even more success, then I hit rock bottom in my own different way, and then I had to stop trading for about 5-6 months, and I got my life back in order. But each time, my growth, my self growth, was absolutely unmeasurable. It's unmeasurable. And I truly believe that each person needs to go through that, and always having a growth mindset and believing that even when you're hot shit, awesome, man, you're making a ton of money, you're doing great. Okay, well, be humble, because that's one thing that I've learned this time. I don't talk about how much money I make. I don't brag about how much P&L I made on the day, or how long of a win streak I'm on, or anything like that, because it doesn't matter. For whoever's watching this video right now, how much money I made over this last week doesn't mean anything to you. Why would it? How long of a win streak I'm on doesn't matter to you at all. So why talk about it? Well, because it allows your ego to feel good. It allows you to feel empowered. And really, that all that's going to do is it's going to add up, and then the market is going to humble you 100%. I don't know how bad it's going to be, but it's got a funny way of doing that stuff. So hopefully you guys got something from this, and like I said, just take one thing and add it to your arsenal, and always keep trying to have a growth mindset. And I'll see you guys in the next one.